Hello and welcome to the show. I am here with guest Lucah Folden. I discovered her story. I discovered the depth of her story through her Instagram account, but I know her mom. We've been childhood friends for many years. And we talked a lot during our visit over the last weekend about Lucah's story. And your mom started showing me your Instagram page, and I was gleaning from it just the magnitude of your journey and how early it started, the body issues that you've had. So the goal of this episode of the show is to commend Lucah for the work she's been doing on herself inside and out, but also if we can help other people figure it out in their early 20s and not spend a whole life uncomfortable in their skin, then that's a good goal for the show today. So thank you for being here, Lucah.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's talk about that. Before the show, in our conversation and in the conversations your mom and I had during our recent visit, we talked a lot about body image that she and I had as when we were younger, and that lent to the discussion of the transition you've made. But you said before the show when we were talking that you've had issues with your body image for as long as you can remember.
Yeah, that's right. And I've been an athlete my whole life, right? I've been active and been in sports, pretty much every sport that I could be a part of, starting at age 3, 4, 5, which I'm really grateful for to my parents. But despite all of the activity I was doing, and despite the good nutrition that I generally was subject to, thanks to my mom, I still just carried more fat on my body. I still just felt like a bigger kid. And, when you're younger at first, you don't take as much notice to those things. But then I got into elementary school and middle school, and you start seeing fashion trends happen, and maybe a little bit more skin is shown, and you just don't feel as comfortable displaying your body in that way. And so I've always just kind of felt like I was bigger than my friends and bigger than the other kids who were eating worse than me even, and exercising just as much. So it was always just confusing and frustrating to always just feel bigger and uncomfortable. And I think that also speaks to a little bit of body dysmorphia that could have even started back then.
It's so fascinating to me how we even understand or start to think, not even understand because it's not a reality, how we start to think that big is not good and small is good, and medium, well, you got to work to be smaller. I mean, what age do you remember thinking that being bigger wasn't good? Because you could have looked at other people and thought they were less normal than you, but for whatever reason, you were projecting the negativity of your size to yourself. Were other people pointing it out to you? Were kids mean to you on the playground? I mean, where did it come from?
That's one thing that's been interesting for me to kind of reflect on too, is that I was never bullied for my weight. It wasn't people were looking at me and telling me, you look fat, you don't look good, you're ugly. I'm feel grateful to not have experienced that. But I think around 5th grade or so, I was in an after school program. And so I was around some older kids too, who had probably started to go down that route a little bit. And I also, I think, got an iPod in 5th grade. And that's when social media was just starting, Snapchat, Instagram. And I don't necessarily remember those issues stemming directly from that media right then, but I definitely think it was around 5th grade, 6th grade. And then especially the transition into middle school, 7th and 8th grade.
That's brutal no matter what.
Right.
It can be brutal no matter what. And yeah. So when you're exercising and you're, because you're not going to the gym in 4th or 5th grade, but you're exercising through your activities.
Yeah.
Your mom is a very healthy eater, always has been. I remember when I was a kid and I would go to her house and they had, whole grain bread and natural peanut butter that you had to stir. That was really, they didn't have, the Jiffy and the white bread that I grew up with. And so, she'd eaten healthy her whole life, and in her home life as well. And so did you have frustration about that? Did you deprive yourself of food because you thought it was about the food? Did you over exercise because you thought it was about the exercise? And at what age did you start really abusing your body to try and get it into a shape that you saw in other people?
Yeah. So I was actually pretty grateful. Like I said, I have been, especially through high school and in middle school too, noticing the food that other people were eating. It was more processed, just more sugar, less general awareness of the actual macros and nutrition portion that food brings us. So that was kind of in high school. I started paying a little bit more attention. I don't think that because of the eating, actually, I'll backtrack a little bit. I do remember in elementary school feeling like when I went over to friends' houses that maybe sometimes that could be my opportunity to have like sugar or, some fun treat and things like that. And that's not to say that those things weren't also made available to me at home, but I think it was exciting because I wasn't really around that processed food, and it just felt like such a treat back then. And then I would overindulge in it, and that's one thing too. I would compare how much food I was getting on my dinner plate to what my grown dad was eating, and felt like that was unfair. And so I think that there was something that was happening back then that led me into my eating ways now. So then in high school, I was still completely active, maybe even more active with, being in season year round. And I was eating healthy, but the changes weren't happening that I was noticing. And so then this big transformation that I've kind of come into happened over the pandemic, where as soon as that hit, food and nutrition and all of that was the last thought.
Yeah, a lot of people went through that. And I think too that, when you talk about going to other kids' houses and seeing these treats, and those gave you comfort in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward to when we were all looking for comfort during those early months or the whole entire first year, that was something, a lot of people turn to: alcohol and any type of abuse, food abuse, whatever it is. And, when you're talking about your friends too, I remember my son. So I never have soda in the house or anything like that. When he was a kid, we would trade off. One week I picked the cereal, the next week he picked it, and he'd pick, the not so good stuff, and it'd be gone in 3 days, whatever the case. But I remember one of my friends, because his friends would come over and they'd bring maybe a 6-pack of root beer or, Capri Suns, something. And my friend told me that her son said that they'd rather not come to our house because we don't have any cool food and drinks.
Oh my God.
And I was glad she told me that. And so I made a deal with my son. I said, look, if you're having friends over, I'll buy you the junk on Friday, and whatever's left after the weekend, it's gone. Like, we're not going to have it here all the time, and we're not going to have it. But if you're having friends over, then I get it, Yeah. And so that kind of is what you're talking about too, and I'm not saying that my friends didn't feed their kids healthily at all, but I think I restricted some of those extras, but it's okay, because to this day in a restaurant, he orders water, not a soda, that kind of thing. So we realize that we're developing those habits in our kids. We're helping them make choices before they're making choices for themselves. So it is something that's a benefit later, but it is also, it gets that treat mentality in your head, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a fine line there. And moderation has totally become huge for me now, in this newer journey that I've been on, and the weight loss that I experienced after the height of the pandemic. But yeah,
let's talk about that. Let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the transition you've made, and we're going to see some before. Well, you've seen some of the before pictures while watching this segment, but you'll see the transition that Lucah has made. It's outstanding. And I'm going to be picking your brain about it for sure. We'll be back. We're talking with Lucah Folden. We'll be back in just a moment. We're back. We're talking with Lucah Folden. Lucah, you were talking about your body image issues as a child and growing up with really healthy eating and maybe taking the treats a little too far when you were outside of your home and making choices out when you were with other people other than your parents. And then the pandemic. So at the height of the pandemic, you were a college student, just entering college, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I lost my last couple months of high school. And that was the OG COVID, as some people call it. So through March or so, 2020 to about November or October of 2020 was really when I took the hardest hit.
And so that was a lot of overeating, and you weren't in any sports, and you had gone to college to play sports, to play a sport. And so you weren't doing that either. So what were you doing? What most of us were doing, overeating and not exercising.
Yep. And not even giving a thought to how the food I was putting in my body was affecting me mentally.
Because before that, you did think about it.
Right. Yeah, I did. And I had an awareness, and I felt okay about it because I was working out,
Right.
And I was just in the routine of school, and my soccer season had ended in November. And so, yeah, I was thinking about it more then. It was just part of my lifestyle, my routine.
And you could see probably quickly how you weren't feeling as well. One of the things I told my son when he left for college, I wrote him a book from letters I'd written him before school every day. The day before he went to school, to preschool, that started a trend where I wrote him a letter every year on the night before he started school. So I gave him this book. And I say that because in sending him off to college, I wrote him a letter talking about, when you get tired, pay attention. Are you drinking enough water? Are you getting enough sleep? If you got a headache, did you eat well today? And I wrote it more eloquently than I'm saying now. But my point was, you're not going to have me to monitor or help you navigate and make sure there's a healthy dinner at home every night, no matter what you ate at school during the day, to kind of balance it out. So you as well were out in the world for the first time, and you had access to anything you wanted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so being cooped up, just taking hit after hit of news that, oh, we actually won't be returning back to school. Oh, you don't get a graduation. Oh, you don't get a prom. Oh, your soccer season got moved from fall to spring. So that meant that I wouldn't be moving to Edmonds College, where I ended up going for some time. And so it just felt like things were just being postponed further and further. And I had the freedom, fresh out of high school, to make more decisions, and those included about my health. And it's interesting because I was in communication with my soccer team and my coach at the time, and we were being encouraged to do workouts. And for some reason, it felt like the hardest possible thing that I could do.
And I think a switch turned for a lot of people. Like, okay, how am I going to navigate this pandemic? Am I going to continue to indulge, or am I going to make a switch? So I was going to kickboxing 4 or 5 days a week before the pandemic. And I worked with him. He trained me 4 or 5 days a week, and I loved it. It was the first thing I'd found that I really loved. And when I was growing up in high school, there was a gym right across the street from the high school. And some of our friends joined that gym. And when I asked my parents, because I didn't have a job, so when I asked them if I could join the gym, my dad said, absolutely not. That's just ridiculous. Why? You can go ride your bike. I was 16 years old. I wasn't going outside to play anymore, right? Where you go out and you're gone till dark, and you're exercising, running, riding your bike, playing with your friends all day long.
Right.
But he, back then, I don't know, it was probably $35, $40 a month. And that was in the late 80s. So that was a lot more money than it is now. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't hear of it. But I do think that like having that workout mentality was lost on me because I didn't develop those habits. I wouldn't have been going to the gym then about my weight or even my health. I'd have been going because my friends were going, because I didn't have a weight issue at that time.
Yeah.
So I was doing it but I think that some of my friends developed that habit or a gym experience where, they had something that they automatically could turn to during the pandemic. And I had just developed that habit. And then the pandemic happened and the gym closed. So what switch turned on you? What switch turned for you when you're talking about those October-ish? Was it just you'd had it, you weren't feeling well? What was it that made you turn that switch and then go into this huge transition, which we're about to share?
I actually had a doctor's appointment, and I hadn't been weighed in months since before the pandemic. And I was weighed. I stepped on the scale and my mouth dropped. I was in shock at how much weight I had gained in those 4 or so months. And I remember going home and just actually, when the doctor left the room, I just broke into tears.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that was the initial moment that things clicked. And I remember going home, and that night I tried to do push-ups on my floor, and I couldn't do what I had done before. Yeah. And I just, more tears, it's like almost dry heaving. I was so upset at who it looked like I had become. And so after that, for about 2 weeks or so, I got pretty serious again. And I realized it wasn't a lack of information, a lack of what I didn't know. I knew what I needed to do. It was a matter of whether or not I was doing it or not. So started, cleaning up my diet for the next couple of weeks, and I saw some weight loss. And then the holidays kind of came around, and I think I got a little bit comfortable again.
So when you made the transition to go into the gym, and let's take a break and come back and show the transformation that you've made, the before and the afters, and just talk about how you went from like gaining this understanding that weightlifting is not even just okay for us to do. It is the thing that really transforms our body. So let's take a break. When we come back, we're talking with Lucah Folden. Promise, we're going to show you those before and afters and show you how she's changed her entire body and her life. We'll be back in just a moment. Hi, I'm talking with Lucah Folden. Okay, I'm going to let's show this before and after right now, because I meant to show it in the second segment. We got to talking. And so what we're seeing here is the transition you made because you joined a gym. You started doing a lot of research about, macros and nutrition and weight training and cardio and the mix of it. A lot of people don't know they do too much of one or not enough of the other. And this is what you accomplished by really just trying to teach yourself what's best for your body. Yeah. It's incredible.
And my body totally responded once I actually started taking those cues into account. It definitely had to start with just the extra fat that I had on my body. And most of what I did lose there just came from changing my eating. It is the kitchen, right? 100%.
It's the kitchen.
It's like an 80-20 rule. Sometimes here's a 70-30, but 80% of the changes you're going to see on your body and your weight loss are going to come in the kitchen. And
let's talk about because your picture is amazing and you're 20, and there might be some people looking going, well, yeah, she's 20. It's easy to lose weight at 20. Well, I'm 50 and it does get harder. But when I treat my body well, it treats me well. It responds fairly quickly to the efforts I put in. It responds fairly quickly when I don't put the effort in too, which is exactly what you're describing about your 20-year-old body.
Exactly. Yeah. It doesn't really change what age you are. If you make the small little adjustments, then you will see results. And it's even little things like not having a soda or a drink when you go out to eat. It's having veggies on the side instead of fries. You can still go out to eat. You can still enjoy these moments, these social moments, especially, which can be difficult. It sometimes feels like to navigate, but these little changes, whatever, and functionality too. You and I spoke a little bit about, I even noticed it in myself. I want to look good in a bikini, but I feel a lot better being able to stand up from the floor, feeling stronger or more quickly. I even noticed changes like that in my 19-year-old body at the time.
I started doing an app when the pandemic hit, and it's like HIIT workouts twice a week and then weight training the other 3 days a week. And one of the exercises that I think about the most in terms of growing old is we have to get up and down from our knee, and there's modifications, but I can do the regular way, and getting up and down on the floor, knees up, down, and doing an overhead press. And the whole point of that kind of functional exercise is to be able to function in regular life and get up from the floor and not needing to hold onto a chair, or starting smaller and, doing what you can, and then getting to the point where maybe you only need the chair when before you couldn't get up at all. So it's starting where you are.
Exactly. I went through the weight loss, and I wasn't lifting, honestly, as much as I should have been during that time. And I think for a little bit there,
people get scared, women especially, right? About putting that extra weight on while you're waiting for the fat to come off.
Yeah, I was finally small, right? I had finally gotten to the smaller size that I wanted, but there was I had lost a lot of muscle. And so when I finally started training to my full ability, not just training to what I thought I could do, but lifting heavier than I thought I could, that's when the results really started coming. And since that about 45-pound weight loss I experienced from March 2021 to December, I've now put on about 10 to 15 pounds more. And the majority of that is muscle. And so and
you don't mind the scale anymore. Before, if you gain 10 to 12 pounds, because you're putting it on in a healthy way, and it is muscle. You can see it in your pictures.
Exactly. Before, if I saw it change on the scale or a lack of a change, I would let that dictate my mood for the rest of the day. I was more irritable, just generally in life. I wasn't as happy. And since healing this mindset, and since weight training and realizing that muscle weighs more than fat, I'm not freaking out, knowing that I'm gaining weight. And I'm actually not stepping on the scale nearly as often. And I think that's a really important part of it too.
And with everything that you've taught yourself already, you feel like you can help other people. You're even considering it as a career going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And that wasn't what I intended starting out on this, but I feel like that I can be relatable for people. And I know what it feels like to not have any type of motivation and to not like what you're seeing in the mirror. And yeah, I really feel like that I can help people kind of come into their bodies and feel comfortable in their bodies and achieve their goals. And because not every person's journey is the same. So yeah, I plan on getting my personal training certification over the summer, just as to help me get there. And I'm really happy to see where I can take this.
Thank you for sharing your story and being willing to share these pictures. I want people of whatever age to understand that the struggle is real. We've all been through some real big, transitions over the last couple of years, and we get to decide. And so thank you for helping share your story and maybe helping other people make that same decision. So thanks for being here, Lucah.